Hello, everyone, and welcome to LinkedIn Editors Live at the Milken Institute Global Conference in Los Angeles. I'm Caroline Fairchild, and along with Devin Banerjee, we'll be bringing you inside one of the biggest business conferences in the world. On today's show, you'll hear from world leaders about the key issues driving the working world forward. We also want to hear from you. What questions do you have for our guests, and who do you want to hear from tomorrow? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll try to get your questions answered right here on today's broadcast. Joining me now in the studio is the CEO of EY, Mark Weinberger. Weinberger leads a professional service organization with roughly 270,000 people working in 150 countries. That gives him a unique look into the global workforce. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Caroline. Happy to be here. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot going on in the future of work, 270,000 employees in 150 countries. That is a lot. Tell us what you're focused on in terms of getting the workforce ready for what's to come.
So, great question. So, we hire 65,000 people a year, so we're always bringing new people on board. Of our 275,000 people, 75% are millennials, so younger people coming in for the first time or moving early on in their career. So the most important thing is to hire the right people, recruiting very important, and then to upskill and reskill. So we spend $500 million, $500 million a year, and 13 million hours training our people to make sure they have the skills to be able to compete in the work world. And what I tell young people today when I do a commencement address or when we hire people is, eventually you're going to be working in a job that doesn't exist today, using technology that hasn't been invented yet to solve a problem we don't know we have. How do you get ready for that? And the answer is lifelong learning. So very important to all of our young people is continuing to learn on the job.
So you mentioned reskilling and retraining. Break down for us what's actually working within EY. We know that there have been programs in the past across public and private companies that just haven't worked. So what's working at EY in terms of getting that mentality of lifelong learning?
It's a great question. So there's three elements to lifelong learning in my view. One is actual learning, the subject matter, the technical in classroom or online learning. The other is experiential development, getting the right experiences in your job every day. That's really important. And the third is mentoring. All three are important for people to be able to learn. The apprenticeship model, which has been so helpful throughout generations, hasn't been applied as much recently, really important. In the actual learning element, we have something called badges, and I actually got it from AT&T, Randall Stevenson, the CEO of AT&T. It's terrific. Individuals get to choose what courses they want to take, AI, digital, robotics processing, in addition to their core competencies of law or tax or audit, and they take those on their own time. They earn badges. Those badges can then be used in social media and internally to qualify to get on new assignments. And the kids, the millennials love it because they get these new skills. We provide it for them with high-class learning online and very variable, so they can take it anywhere. And then they apply it on their jobs, and that's a great way to learn.
You mentioned hiring the right people. How has that changed in your time at EY? And when you're thinking about looking for people who have that lifelong learning, how do you screen for that? How do you find those people so you're making sure you are bringing in the right people?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a lot of different things around the world, right? You said we're in 157 countries. It's
Exactly.
different in different places.
Yep.
But really importantly, it's the mindset, not the skill set, that's so important. People who have to be able to team well and adapt well is incredibly important. So when we do recruiting today, we don't only look for the highest degree, highest grade candidates. We have actual, we put them through real world on the job kind of projects. We monitor them. We have an interview process. So in the UK, for example, we did away with hiring just the best schools, the top-notched, top-graded students, and applied our own set of standards using technology and robotics.
Yep.
And bottom line is we hired about 20 to 25% of people that would not have qualified if we just used our old standards. And importantly, they're more diverse. They're people who didn't and couldn't afford to go to the best schools, get the highest grades and the best universities, but are absolutely diamonds in the rough, who are going to be fantastic for us and have already proven to be great employees.
You mentioned technology, robotics. When we talk about automation, AI creeping into the workplace, there is a lot of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
What are you seeing on the ground actually right now about how these technologies are impacting the work at EY? How are jobs changing?
So it's really, so you think about it this way, you think about an old factory worker for example, they would have had to in the old state and some in the current state move boxes around factories, do a lot of logistical moving and things. Now those same workers are operating robotics to move things around. So it's a different skill, even though the job is similar. Same is true at EY. So while we're hiring 65,000 people a year, Caroline, we have 2,000 robots. Now they're not taking jobs, they're taking tasks. So the more repetitive tasks, the things that our employees necessarily wouldn't want to do. We have drones that now do inventories where you have to do site checks around the world. that information comes back, and our younger people are still analyzing and making decisions on that information, but in the past they would have had to manually go and do all those things. So it's actually upskilling the type of jobs younger people get, giving them more responsibility earlier in their career.
But when CEOs like you talk about tasks going away, that turns into jobs where people kind of are fearful that as soon as all the tasks go away, there's no job for me. So break down what you actually mean when you say upskilling. How are we sure that EY is still going to be hiring 65,000 people 5 years from now?
Yeah, no, it's an important question. And I think artificial intelligence, which is really the next frontier in technology, will challenge more of the higher thinking types of jobs that our people do. When you're talking about, and rightfully so, the type of jobs that will go away in the short term, they're probably not as many of the type of jobs EY has, but they will be the more, the truck drivers that will have automated vehicles, and factory workers who will need less people to move goods around when robots are doing it. The working in fast food restaurants where now computers can take the information and provide service. Those type of things, lower and middle and jobs will go away more quickly, the repetitive type. But for the larger, more complicated issues, doing an audit, putting an M&A deal together, working on complicated tax issues, you're going to use technology to make your job easier, but I think it's still going to require a tremendous human element to it.
And of course, EY is a client-facing business. When we talk about technology coming into the workplace, particularly with big data, that can lead to mistrust. So how is EY ensuring that technology is coming in a safe way that keeps clients happy?
It's an incredibly important question. I mean, the most important thing to EY and almost any business, certainly professional service business, is the brand. So you have to protect your data. That's really important to your brand. So we collect data from all over the world. In our audits, for example, we have a technology called Canvas that connects that up. We put it on the cloud and we guard the cloud. We have a cybersecurity practice as well. We do lots of work around cyber. We have multi-authenticity signing on, and we have extra protections to make sure that individuals can't break into our systems. We test every single day for millions of hits that we get for people trying to break into our organization. And reality is that people will get in. The hard part's going to be making sure they don't get information out so it's not leaked, and when they're in, you find them and limit any damage, because what we're finding out, whether it's a state actor, whether it's individuals with the malintent or whatever, people are finding ways to get into all kinds of businesses. As we read the newspaper every day, the key is having a plan to deal with that and respond to it.
And when you read those newspapers and see the headlines of the big data breaches, what goes through your mind as a CEO? How do you sleep at night with things like that? They're happening all the time.
They are, but part of it is really when you have a problem, you have to know, crisis sometimes makes the leader, right? So you have to be prepared and know how to deal with it. So you have to have a communications team ready, you have to have a response team ready, you have to know how to get your general counsels involved, you have to be able to communicate to all of your stakeholders, the regulators, to your employees, to the government officials, and we're very prepared for that. I think CEOs, really, to this day and age, don't have to just run their P&L. That's really important as always, but now more and more, CEOs have to be responsible for any potential crisis, geopolitical, regulatory, God forbid, in some ways, a humanitarian crisis, and being prepared is a lot of it.
And let's talk about how you get prepared. Edelman came out with its trust barometer this morning, and 71% of employees said that they think it's important for their CEO to speak out during challenging times. How do you view your work in terms of making sure that you're not just talking about the business, but about everything else that is happening right now in the world?
So, great question, Caroline. And I'm a big believer that CEOs have a huge responsibility. As you said, we have 270,000 people across many countries. Our employees are looking to us to have a voice on issues that affect our business and our values. So I don't think we should be speaking out as CEOs on political issues and helping to get people elected or anything like that. But when there are issues that go to our operation as a business, our values as an organization, we need to have a voice. And so today, trade issues, immigration issues, cross-border issues, environmental issues, regulatory issues, all affect our business. So CEOs today have a much broader responsibility to all of their stakeholders and have to explain not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it, and take positions that they wouldn't have had to take in the past.
And you've spoken out recently about taxes, how keeping those low is good for businesses and for families. Why did you speak out on that issue, and why is it important to you?
Because I think the environment that the government creates for business to operate is incredibly important. And when you have a system like it was in the United States, I think you're probably referring to, which is the last major tax reform, and they had a system that the tax rate was so high, and it kept so much money overseas affecting good business decisions, it was slowing down global growth, slowing down job creation. So I was a big fan of not just lowering the rates, but then putting in provisions also that would protect against abuse. And so there's a lot of anti-abuse provisions, what they call base erosion provisions, that were put in. So today, as opposed to before the tax reform, when our clients go to make a business decision, it's a business decision. It's not based upon trying to avoid tax or trying to do something that's not economically from an employee and business standpoint, just to be, because you have to pay too high a tax rate. I think it's really important that businesses are allowed to operate based on business decisions.
And when we think about how the private sector communicates about the public sector, Edelman's Trust Barometer also saw that there's more trust in CEOs right now than there is in the government.
Yeah.
What does that tell us in terms of how the role of private employers need to play in terms of changing things for the economy?
So it tells us, first of all, there's a lot of low trust in the rest of the world, when business leaders now are back at the top. For a long time we weren't. I absolutely think this is crucial. I mean, our stakeholders listen to us. We work in almost every community across the world. If we don't speak for what's right overall, not just what's great for EY, then who will? And our employees, our 75% of our employees are millennials, really want that to happen. And I think that's a crucial responsibility that CEOs have today. So I'm heavily involved in government. I worked on task force with the US government. I work within China, Russia, all over the world, telling our point of view about what they're doing, how they're going to affect our business, our employees, our investors, and everybody else.
Speaking about the economy, if you look at a lot of measures right now, we're in a pretty good spot, but we do have CFOs saying that a pending recession could happen before 2020. How do you look at the economic forecast in terms of making hiring decisions and how you're thinking about the future for EY?
So this is an important question. So I think you have to sometimes ignore the signal and ignore the noise and focus on the signal. Over the longer term, the global economy is in a very good situation. I think a year or so ago, we were probably overly optimistic. G20, we're all growing. We thought the world was going to expand at a full pace forever. This past year, we said, oh my gosh, we're going into recession, probably exaggerate on the downside. We are absolutely seeing more risks in the global economy to growth than we had seen for a while, but it's still a strong and growing economy, particularly in the United States. And China, which has even slowed down, is now upticking again, still growing over 6%. India is growing over 7%. The US at over 3.2% is very strong. When was the last time in the United States we had more job openings than employees able to fill it, and our wages were growing faster than inflation by 2 percentage points, and business investment was being poured in to this country. And so it's a very good environment for investment. But for the longer term, you should be making these decisions not in next quarter, or what may happen next year, frankly over the 3, 5 to 7 years out, where we make those important investments in our people and our assets.
I'm going to take a question here from the stream. Ricky Chen wants to know, related to wanting low taxes for business, how do you feel about companies like Amazon being able to avoid taxes completely?
Well, I can't speak to Amazon's individual circumstances, but no, I don't think any company should avoid taxes completely, and I'm not sure Amazon does. I think the big issue with Amazon, of course, is, and many of these virtual retailers and companies that are e-commerce companies, is where should they be taxed? Because they earn income with the click of a mouse, serving somebody in the other part of the world. Is it in the country where the consumer you tax it? Is it where you sell it? Is it where the assets of people are? So a lot of the big decisions around tax policy going forward are going to be, how do you determine where income is earned and who should tax it at what rate in that country? That's going to be a big issue, because income taxes are not as effective as retail taxes, either sales taxes or value-added taxes, to go after those type of transactions. And of course, the United States doesn't have a national value-added tax, and some countries don't. So this is going to be a really important issue going forward as countries compete for tax revenues.
And before I let you go, Mark, you're stepping down in July. How are you thinking about succession planning at EY, and what can we expect from you next?
Well, thank you for the question. Anybody who leaves their job just wants to, I believe, have the company that they're leaving be stronger and more sustainable than it was in the past. We are absolutely well prepared. We added 100,000 people in the last 6 years. Our revenue grew by 50%. We have more people serving more clients across the world than in our history. I'm excited about where the firm is and how it's going forward. My successor, his name is Carmine DeCivio. He's worked with me for the last 6 years. He's been at the firm for 35 years. He's fantastic. And under them, we have a great new leadership team. We had a great bench to pick from. My whole board, 19 people, has changed over the last 6 years, completely 100%. So we're ready for the future. What I'm going to do next, I'm not so ready for that. I'm not going to decide that till after July 1 when I step down from my current role and figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
All right, we'll be watching. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Caroline. It was fun.